the missed decisions that have put Americans in harm's way, and a decision to leave Americans behind. That choice and that answer should never be given as a President of the United States.
This week, we are breaking down the evacuation of Kabul, and joining us is Politico's Pentagon reporter, LARA SELIGMAN. What stands out to you as the most important developments up until this week that we'll likely be remembering from this episode?
What I certainly am going to remember, and I think what the rest of the country is probably going to remember too, is just how rapidly things really unfolded in Afghanistan.
The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated.
As someone who covers the Pentagon, did you see a sort of gap between what your sources and what folks in the national security establishment were seeing on the ground, and perhaps what people who are more involved in the political conversation around this?
The one gap I did see was that just before this was happening at the White House, they were celebrating domestic policy. They were celebrating the passage of their infrastructure bill. And they were posting photos on Instagram of President Biden and the vice president fist pumping from the Oval Office. And many officials at the National Security Council were going on vacation. So they thought they had a big win here. And they just didn't realize that right around the corner, there was a foreign policy catastrophe just waiting to happen.
Let's talk about what, in my view, is one of the most important and incredible scoops of reporting of the Biden administration.
So what it was based on was a classified transcript, essentially, or readout, detailed notes of 3 separate calls that occurred among the highest levels of Pentagon leadership on Wednesday, August 25th, which, as you said, was the day before the attack. It includes Defense Secretary Austin, as well as Milley and General McKenzie of Central Command, and then commanders on the ground. Defense Secretary Austin made clear that he knew, and commanders on the ground knew, that there was an imminent threat to the Kabul airport that they had pinpointed not just to a very specific time frame, but also to a very specific place. Abbey Gate. Commanders at Kabul airport plan to have Abbey Gate closed by Thursday afternoon as to try to prevent an attack like this. But the Americans actually decided to keep that gate open longer than they wanted in order to allow the British to continue evacuating their people. Everyone really was running around with their hair on fire and thinking that this attack, some kind of attack, was going to happen at the airport imminently. You have the British and the French and other allies accelerating their withdrawal, trying to get their people out as quickly as possible. You have the State Department and the US Embassy sending out alerts to American citizens who are trying to get to the airport, to get out, telling them to stay away from the airport due to the imminent threat. The problem was, of course, in such a dynamic, chaotic situation, something might get through. And that's ultimately what ended up happening. Because we kept the gates open, American troops were still screening entrance to the airport when the suicide bomber was able to walk up to them and detonate his vest. So if we had closed the gates, it's possible that the attack would have been averted, or at least if not averted, then all these American troops would not have died.
One of the other really eye-opening portions of your reporting was about how reliant the military operation in Kabul is on the Taliban.
There's not much we can do without them. We were allowing them to bus evacuees from pickup locations to the airport. They were manning the checkpoints. We were relaying them precise details about our processes for getting American citizens into the gates. We were actually giving them lists of names of evacuees to check off as they were bringing them into the airport. There were a lot of things that we were communicating directly with the Taliban, including this imminent potential threat that we knew was happening sometime on Thursday and Friday. General McKenzie, the commander of Central Command, even says the Taliban is pretty much helping us right now, but their willingness to help us is going to decrease every day that we stay in Afghanistan. past August 31st, which is the day they wanted us out.
What do you expect could be the fallout from your reporting about the decision not to close Abbey Gate that afternoon?
You've already seen in the past week or so, Republican lawmakers saying they wanted to investigate what happened in Afghanistan and how the Biden administration handled it.
We recognize the failure of our executive, and it's the right thing to do for the President of the United States to preserve some modicum of honor and to step down.
What should we be watching in the days and weeks following those final flights out of Kabul?
How does the Taliban govern Afghanistan? Do they go back to their brutal practices of hunting down and killing people, and as well as suppressing women? Or do we see a little bit more freedom and democratic values from them? The other thing we want to watch out for is the terrorist threat, not just from the Islamic State, but also from Al-Qaeda. The Taliban and Al-Qaeda do have these ongoing ties, and these aren't going away anytime soon. So while the president did say there's the threat from Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Afghanistan to the U.S. homeland does no longer exist, that is not technically true, as we saw on Thursday when 13 American service members died.
Last night in Kabul, the United States ended 20 years of war in Afghanistan, the longest war in American history.
That means that Biden now has to deal with any fallout from the end of the evacuation, what to do about the estimated few hundred Americans who did not leave the country, but also from the Biden administration's point of view, opportunities that now exist with the United States not, in their view, being bogged down in Afghanistan anymore.